All right, so as I said, make sure you have a black and white image to start with. And if you're using Photoshop, then I'm gonna assume you know how to open the file as a JPEG. But the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna save it as a PSD. A PSD is a fancy way, it's just an acronym for saying Photoshop file or document, PSD. So when you have your JPEG open, you're gonna do save as. And I'm gonna put this in my workshops folder, but you put it wherever you can find it. Photoshop has a lovely habit, depending on your computer, of randomly crashing. So I would advise that you save it right when you start. So right now, if it's a JPEG, if you scan this image in and it's like, you know, or you took a picture from your phone, it's likely a JPEG. You're going to switch the save as type to the first one available, which is Photoshop or PSD file or whatever media file you're using. I'm gonna just name mine Christmas tree. Save it. Now, it doesn't actually change anything. It doesn't look any different. It still inherently has the properties of a JPEG. But now when we add more layers, it's gonna save that information so that we don't lose any info. So make sure when you're working, while you're still working on your file, keep it as a Photoshop document until you are ready and you're finished, you know, and then you can save as a JPEG again, but colored, obviously. Okay. Next, I'm gonna go real quick through the toolbars and the window settings. Sometimes I know, especially for me when I'm working with Adobe software, there are a lot of windows and toolbars and things everywhere that can be confusing sometimes. So in this case, if you can't see everything that I can see, I would recommend going to, at the very top, Window, Workspace, and I like to use Essentials. It's the default. It's whatever Photoshop comes with, but sometimes there are different modes that you can use in Photoshop, and they just cater to having different tools readily available for you immediately so that you can see them. But what I found happens sometimes is that I might accidentally close something, and if you're not familiar with it, and if you have a bunch of windows everywhere and you're like, oh my gosh, what are all these options? I am so lost. It can be really confusing for a beginner because I was there. I've been using Photoshop since 1999, and it's one of those things where luckily not many things have changed, but sometimes they do. So if you ever get really stuck and you don't know where your stuff is, you go to Window, Workspace, Reset, Essentials. And that'll just make everything go back to where it was when you first started. Okay, Milo's being absolutely ridiculous. She is like, just, yeah, okay. She is an attention hog. All right, so the absolute first thing we're gonna do, if you have a JPEG that is not clean, and what I mean by clean is that if it's not super high contrast, and I apologize if this is gonna move really slowly for some of you, and really it might be just holler if you need me to slow down, but I'm not gonna go too fast. We're just gonna let Milo teach this class now. Let me grab, just for the people who might be using, I wonder if I have any sketches in here. I totally didn't prepare this aspect of it. If I have any sketches that I can clean up of like a grayed out image that might be a sketch or an ink that was taken with a camera. Give me one quick sec. It is handy to know, and I know that you guys might not have, oops, sorry, you don't need to see my emails. Let's see if we can open it here. Oh goodness, Google. I want the browser not right in our faces. Okay, so I'm just gonna grab a real quick image that I can find maybe. All right, I wonder if I have any sketches in here that I can grab. Sorry, here, this is just the Milo show for now. Goodness. I don't think I have any. I haven't sketched in so long, this is kind of embarrassing. So let's look for a picture. Oh, here's one. copy image. All right. So this is just going to be a real quick run through on how to clean up an image if you're bringing it in from your phone. All right, so this is a sketch I did for a friend inside one of their journals. And you can see like it's not, like what we're looking for is to have the background pure white, because any colors that we put on top, we don't want it to be affected by the grain or the lighting. So I'm gonna real quick go through, where is it? There it is. So we have our image, you have your black and white image, and you're gonna go to, this is the fastest way to do it. You go to Image, Adjustments, and Levels. Now, another thing I'm just gonna show you, it might be the same with GIMP, but with Photoshop, there are shortcut keys, which I use a lot, and I would highly recommend putting some of them to memory if you plan on doing this often. So adjustment for levels is Control L. So you can either do it through looking through here, or you can just hit Control L. It might be Command L on the Mac. So your levels window pops up. These are like the levels of black and white information. You're gonna see. I know, she's ridiculous. She's a great mascot though. It's that time of day where she's super snuggly. All right, so what I have gotten used to seeing here is that you just kind of play around with arrows until you get the effect that you want. But to really make the whites appear and have the blacks as clear as possible, you drag the arrow inside the input levels. This is all going to be open up default. You're not going to have to touch the RGB. You're not going to have to touch any of the presets. Don't touch anything. Just touch these little sliders here. And you're going to drag this one that's all the way on the right up to this little ramp here. And what it does is it clarifies the background without affecting. I like to put it right at the peak here. If you put it too much, then you're going to start losing this black and white info. That's no fun. Although if it's an inked image, it might be a bit easier. This is a sketch, so. The middle slider deals with midtones. The left slider deals with shadows. And the furthest to the right is the lightness levels. All right, so that's, I'm gonna say about that, but we still have this like funky gradient, right? Because when we took this picture, the sunlight was affecting it. So I'm going to get rid of the color information. And by doing that, I go to Image, Adjustments, Hue Saturation. That is Control U. And do that. And what this does is it gives us different controls for adjusting the color in your image. So you can, this is a fun trick for later on if you want to do something, you can change the overall hue of the picture. It's not really effective here because we are dealing with a black and white sketch, but you can see in the corner here how it's changing the color of the table in the background, the surface. Just keep it at 0, it doesn't really matter right now. Saturation will change how much of the color information is showing. What I want to do is get rid of the color information. So I'm going to drag it all the way to the left so that the saturation is at -100. And that makes it a black and white image. There are lots of ways to make things a black and white image. Hello, Alan Price. Welcome to our Photoshop tutorial. I'm just running through real quick how to edit a drawing or an ink file before we start coloring it. Some of you might already have a cleaned up image, some of you might not. This is my cat Milo. She's extremely affectionate and needy right now, so we're just gonna have to put up with that. I'm sure you don't mind. All right, the lightness thing, you can change it, but I don't like changing it too much because it changes the information of the actual sketch. Leave it at that. Now this kind of graded out again, but it's almost workable. I might want to adjust the levels one more time, see how it's changed now that we made it black and white. Make it a bit brighter, hit OK. The bottom is still dark, so I'm gonna use the dodge tool. It lightens an area, not the entire thing. And that's on your toolbar on the left. It should show. If you can't see it, it's near the middle bottom, and it contains 3 different tools: dodge, burn, and sponge. Dodge deals with lightening, burn deals with darkening, sponge deals with saturation. So we're gonna stick to dodge. My brush is huge because the last time I used it was probably for a file that was a lot higher res. You can deal with the size up here. There's a toolbar. Again, if you can't find your toolbars, go to Window, Workspace, Reset Essentials, and it should pop up here. If you still can't see it, some of them are under the Windows panel. We are dealing with the Properties panel, I believe, or Options, one or the other. Find your brush, make it a bit smaller. The size is at the top here. Actually, I think I might keep it big because I want to cover a large area. Dragging it all the way there, make it nice and big. So now we're dealing with the dodge tool. And I'm just gonna click it a few times at the bottom. See how her foot's getting lighter? The background, it's a bit too much. Let's try switching it up to whoa. Highlights. Ooh, yeah, there we go. So now when I click on it, it's only dealing with the highlighted areas. Again, this is like probably not the most effective because this is a sketch, but if you're dealing with an inked drawing, then it might be a little easier to do. Milo just left. She doesn't like me anymore. So anyway, this should make your image a little bit easier to deal with. So I'm gonna assume that this GIMP level adjustments are in the color menu up top. Thank you so much, Justin. And I continue to encourage anyone sharing with some either Procreate or GIMP or anything. Level adjustments, yeah, that should be pretty universal. I'm gonna close this and go back to my Christmas tree picture. Okay, there it is. So ideally, we should be here with a flat image that's black and white and somewhat clean. Okay, now there are so many different ways to approach this. One thing I want to go real quick is the view. So when you're in Photoshop, there are different ways to look at your image, and you'll notice that I'm constantly pushing and pulling my image around. And that is, I hit the space bar. You can also use the hand tool. I don't even know if it's here. I just hit the space bar. I don't really know where the hand tool is anymore. I use it so often. Anyway, I'm sure it's in there somewhere. If you hit the space bar, this little hand appears. You can see it over my face here. Do you need a printer to do this? No, you don't. I wouldn't say you need a printer to do this at all. Photoshop, like this is an image that I made in Photoshop, that I drew in Photoshop with a brush tool. If you were to, in Medibang Pro there in the filter menu, thank you. Yeah, so you would just take a picture of a drawing, or you can use a scanner and scan in a drawing in black and white. Either one works. Where was I? The hand tool. The hand tool lets you drag your canvas around. And if you hit, these are little different views. At the very bottom of your toolbar, you can change screen mode. I just hit F. That's the shortcut key. It changes it so that it's either a dark background, and you hit F again, and your toolbars come back. You hit F again, and then it maximizes your workspace. So it cycles through them. So it goes from somewhat background where you can drag. Oops, that's my OBS. Sorry, I should lock that. Spacebar does the same thing. Excellent. You're using a coloring book page format from the internet. The only thing I'm concerned about that, Amelia, is that it might not be high res enough. Oh, that might be something I should talk about. To check what size your image is. Image size. Now, my image is 2000 pixels wide, and it's at 200 resolution. That just means it's a whole other can of worms on its own. But basically, if you're taking a picture from your phone, it should automatically be a high resolution image. But if you're taking a picture from the internet, it might be very small. I would say stick to pictures that are at least 1000 pixels wide. That way we can actually zoom in and still have a lot of information. But it's not crucial. It's a quality issue. Like if you're planning on printing this out for later, then it might be an issue. Otherwise, if you're just doing this for the sake of learning, don't worry about it. But typically I would recommend an image that is a bit higher, so at least 800 to 2000 pixels wide. The resolution is more important when we're printing later on, but we don't need to know that right now. It would just make a difference as to, like right now, this image is fairly high res, so I can keep zooming in and you don't see the pixels until I get pretty close in. Oh, to grab the zoom key, you hit Z. Or Z, sorry. And I have it set in Photoshop so that at the top here there's a little check mark that says Scrubby Zoom. And Scrubby Zoom lets you drag your mouse key, drag the mouse and go in and out. So when I pull it to the left, it zooms out. When I pull it to the right, it zooms in. But you can also hit the Z key and then zoom out. I have it set to zoom out by default. And if I hit Alt, which is next to the keyboard, it changes it. If you can see that, it changes it to zoom in, zoom out. If you can see at the top there, I'm hitting Alt on my keyboard. When I hit Alt, it changes to zoom out and I click. When I let it go, it's at zoom in. Hopefully that's handy for you guys. Shortcut keys are modifiable. You can actually customize them in Photoshop and probably in GIMP as well. We're not going to go through that today, but you can set your own keyboard shortcuts if you don't like what Photoshop gives you, or if you were using a tablet that has custom buttons, you can also set your shortcut keys to use, like if you're using a Wacom or a Cintiq or something, and there are buttons along the side, those are programmable, and you can actually program them to different functions in Photoshop. Cool. I think we're just about ready with all the side stuff. The next first thing we're gonna do with Photoshop, I'm going to explain real quick. I made a side image here. Try not to pay attention to actually what to how I'm doing this. I just wanted to explain it. So when you have an image in Photoshop and it says background here, this is your background layer, okay? This is really important because when you open your image, it's only going to have one layer because it was a JPEG, which is a flattened image, okay? So I'm going to make a diagram. This is a piece of paper, okay? You following me? This is a lovely piece of paper. This is our picture, okay? It's a JPEG. It's a Christmas tree. I can draw. So this is a JPEG. This is the background layer. Now, this is really important because it helps you visualize how these programs work. If you're not familiar with dealing with second verse, saves the first. Thanks, Justin. Also, hi Maria, welcome. If you're not used to dealing with software or digital art in general, you're not going to be. I've just been using this for so long, I don't even think about it anymore. I take it for granted. But in Photoshop, the layers panel, what it's doing is it groups all of your images in layers. And what layers are in Photoshop are like clear, transparent. I picture it like, you know, if you're old enough and in class you had your teacher teach with those projectors with the transparent printouts, and they would put them under the lamp and it would project onto the wall. That's what I'm saying. So like with layers, they are as if your teacher took, or you or whoever took, a transparent layer. Okay, this is clear, okay? This, you can see through this. And each additional layer floats on top of each other in this layer panel. This is the panel. This is my attempt to write a panel. Okay, this is our background. And it shows a little thumbnail, and here's a layer. Well, I just do it here. So layer 1, layer 2. See, when the new layer button is at the bottom right, and it's right next to it says create a new layer, or delete the layer, or create a group, yada, yada, yada. So if you ever hear people talking about what layer are you in? Oh, I was in the wrong layer. That means that you might have been creating artwork in the wrong layer, which means it will affect the stuff around it. So what I'm trying to explain here is that these are different layers and they are transparent. They are see-through. There's nothing on them until you put something on them. And to put something on them, hey Jen, how's it going? This is gonna be the best recording ever because I'm randomly saying hi in the chat. We're just going real quick through layers. I get way too detailed, so we haven't even started coloring yet. So your layers are represented in your panel, and they group automatically from the bottom to the top. So they stack. Every time you add a new layer, it's gonna stack them in the, so this is like this one, and this is this one, and this is our background layer, okay? Yes, so in Photoshop, GIMP, Procreate, all that stuff, super, super, super important to know what layer you're on, okay? So when you're in Photoshop, you can change your layer just by clicking it. If you double click it, something crazy will happen. If you double click it somewhere else, it's a mess, but it's okay. Simple one click to select the layer, and then it will put the stuff on that layer. So we're gonna go back to our image here, keeping that transparencies, the stacked projector transparencies in mind, okay? So when I create a new layer, here, this is layer 1, and the background, this is our Christmas tree. You can toggle the visibility, which means just turning on and off the little eyeball. It shows if our layer is on or off. Now, this is also important. The checkered background, which you see a lot, it just means there's nothing there. It's a void. There's nothing there. The transparency, that means if you open a PNG file, if you're familiar with PNG files, they're transparent. That's what we use for icons and different floating elements. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. I'm just trying to say that that's Photoshop letting you know that there's no information there. Onions have layers. Ogres are like onions. Yes. By association, property layers are ogres. I prefer to consider them like the transparencies my teacher would write notes on during math class with the projector. So we toggle the visibility. If you ever can't find your stuff and you're like, oh my gosh, where did my stuff go? Make sure you have the layers panel. If you don't want to reset your whole workspace, you go to Window and you make sure your layers are visible here. So they're visible, and we click on our background layer, on, off, on, off. And we have a layer floating on top, but we have a clear one on top, and if I toggle the visibility there, nothing happens because we haven't entered any information on top of that. So, hello Anuti, how are you? Welcome to our Photoshop stream of coloring. And right now we're just setting up our file. Okay, so I will invite you to play around with your layers for a minute. I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna grab the brush tool. You should all have some kind of brush tool. The brush tool simply deposits a pure color onto a layer based on, there are a few settings. You can change the opacity, the thickness, the weight. You can download brushes, but the default ones with Photoshop have always been really great for me. So I just hit B for brush. You'll rarely see me actually selecting the tools. I just know all the shortcut keys of the stuff I use all the time. So B is for brush. You can change it if you want. If you hit Shift and B, it'll scroll through the different options in your brushes. So right now I'm hitting Shift on my keyboard and the B key, and I tap it, and it gives me the different brush properties. You can tell if a tool has more than one option. If it has this little arrow in the bottom right of the icon, you hold it down and it gives you, I'm holding it with my mouse key right now, and see it has a little B there. It just means that B is the shortcut key for all of them. There's the brush tool, the pencil tool, color replacement tool, and mixer brush tool. We're not touching any of those today. We're gonna stick to the brush tool. Okay, so I got my brush. Milo's asking for my lap again. Hey baby, how are you? Okay. So notice that I'm selecting my layer 1, and I have the brush tool selected. We're almost ready to make some color happen, you guys. I'm so excited. We're gonna do this a few ways. I don't know how many ways are relevant, but first I'm just gonna show you how the layers work. So I'm gonna select a color in the color panel. Excuse me, Milo is on my lap. We're gonna choose green because trees are green. A nice neon, whatever green. Select your color in your color picker, and you'll see that your active color for your brush is also at the bottom left here in your toolbar. There are two squares. The front square, this brush we're using right now, not really important. I'm using the hard round brush, okay? That's my default. That's the go-to for me. It comes with Photoshop, so it's just hard round brush. If you have a tablet and you're using some kind of drawing tablet and you have pressure sensitivity available to you, you want to make sure that up here, always use pressure for size. Pressure for size means that when you, I'm gonna make my brush bigger. When you have your brush, just click anywhere out of it if you can't close your window, typically. So you see my brush tool here, I'm gonna push on it, and then, oops, I also have pressure for, okay. It means when I press lightly, it'll be small, and the harder I press, the bigger the brush tool gets, okay? Just to let you guys know, I'm using a Wacom, a Cintiq, okay? So this is what I'm working with. This doesn't mean this is the only way you can do it. You can be using a Bamboo, a Graphire, a tablet, but this is the setup I have just in case you're curious, okay? Just thought I'd throw that out there. And thank you, Justin, for the view layers under dockable dialogues. So precise. Okay, as you can see, I'm just dragging this around. It's opaque, which means you can't see through it, okay? But like we've lost our line art. And we haven't ruined our image because, hey, guess what? It's in the layer 1, right? So we can toggle it on and off. So that's just to give you an understanding of what's happening with these layers, okay? This layer is kind of garbage. I don't like it. So we can drag it to the trash can because we don't need it. It was just a demo. So now to the way that I typically color a black and white image is I like to have my black and white line art at the top. Yeah, you can get pretty accurate with the tablet, which is really nice. Hi, Milo. I'm getting used to so much fur on my shirt. What I like to do, if we look back at our sample here, all right, so what I like to do when I'm coloring an image, I don't like the background to be my line art. Eventually, I would like the background layer to actually be the background of my picture, right? So how I like to arrange my my file is I have the ink layer on top. I'm just gonna explain it before I do it. So, and then I have like, say, the tree, and then I might make a group out of it, and then underneath the tree, we're gonna have like ornaments and snow. Okay, so this is kind of the structure that we're gonna go for eventually. To do that, we need to change our background layer to a regular layer. And to do that, there are a few ways. You can just double click on it, and it's gonna ask you, do you want a new layer? It's just asking you if you want to convert your background layer into being a regular layer, which will let us do things to it. Right now, as a background layer, we can't do, it's got this little lock symbol. It's because it's the bottom of the file, and we can't change it. It's like if we delete it and then try to save it, Photoshop doesn't know what it's doing, you know? So what we have to do is we have to change it into a regular layer. So you can either double click on it or you can drag it to the new layer. Oh, sorry, that just duplicates it. Never mind, that's another thing altogether. Yeah, I think we'll do that. So you can either right click and say duplicate layer, and then it's gonna ask you, what do you want to call your duplicate layer? And I'm gonna call it Christmas. No, I'm gonna call it ink, just inks, because it's the black and whites. Say okay. So now we have this beautiful new layer. It's a complete copy. So when I toggle the visibility, it's the same as the one underneath. Now we don't need 2 layers of the artwork. So I'm gonna take off the visibility of the inks layer. So I'm just dealing with the background layer. And I wanna make this white because I just want the background to be white for now. So I'm gonna go image, I'm gonna go select all. Another shortcut again is to do Control A. And I'm just going to clear it. Or you can hit delete. It's gone. Oh no, it's okay. It's the background layer. We want to keep it white or whatever color. And then I'm gonna turn back on my ink layer again. So now we have 2 layers, the background and the inks. You can toggle the inks layer on and off to test it. You see these little lines, they move, they're going up and down. That just indicates that you have a selection active in this layer. So you don't want that when you're working. You just go select, deselect. Again, Control D does it automatically, so I normally just do it without thinking. Control D, deselects your image. Now, just to let you know, if you left the selection on, if you didn't do deselect, it just means that it's narrowing down what it's selecting so that when you do an action, it'll be active on that selection. So if I hit delete again, now our ink layer is gone. We don't want that, but I left my select on, so I'm gonna do Control Z. Control Z is also your friend. I'm gonna deselect it. Okay. Layer modes. So for the ink layer, I want it to be see-through. I want so that when I make some colorful layers underneath, I want the black and white. I just want the black to show, not the white. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna change the layer blending mode. Yes, we are. So if I show you back to that thing here, I want my inks to be on top and then color. These will be color layers underneath. So to do that, if I make a new layer, again, it's gonna be on top of everything and I don't want that. I'm gonna say this is gonna be my tree, the pine needles. I'm gonna rename it. I'm gonna double click on the actual words. If you double click on the side, it's gonna give you the layer style window. I mean, you can't rename anything from there, which drives me nuts, but whatever. So you just close that. You don't need that. You need to double click the text. It's silly, but you can also, I mean, you can also right click, and I think you can rename from there. Honestly, I've never done it before. Delete, group, whatever. No, I don't think you can. You have to double click the text. We're gonna name it green. You can't clear it, it's grays out. Oh, that depends on what color your background color is. I forgot to mention. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm gonna duplicate it for the sake of example. So when you do select all and then delete or clear, it's gonna, normally it does the background color that's in your palette. So if I click on the back square, oops, sorry. If I click on this little square here, this is black at the front, it means that's my active color, foreground color. If I change the background color, I click on it, it's gonna ask me to change the color. Say I'll make it red. It doesn't change anything, it's just the color that's active, but I'm pretty sure that when you do edit clear, oh no, it doesn't do that. Sorry, I was totally wrong. If you can't get it to just be white, okay, I'm gonna make it so that the background layer has pine trees on it again. Oh, you didn't select all, okay. But there are a lot of ways to do it. So if I select all, you can also say edit fill, and you can just fill it with the foreground color. That's what I was trying to say. And then it'll fill it with my foreground color, which I had selected as black. So there are a lot of ways to do it. I can say, no, I just want it white. Now this option comes up when you do edit fill. Another shortcut is Shift F5. I use it a lot for other reasons, but edit fill will just automatically flood your canvas with whatever color is there. Are we good? I hope we're good. Let me just rename things to go back. All right, so your layers, what we're gonna do is we're gonna put them in order. You can just click them and drag them to move them around. See the little double blue line? That means it will be it'll move the layer up there or wherever you want. So I'm gonna drag it, little hand, and then let go. I want my inks on top, the ink layer up top. So right now, because I have white filled pixels here and black on top of white, it is a flat image. If I make my middle new layer, the green layer that I made, it's called green, it's no green on it yet. It is a lot of setup, but I'm going into extreme detail. Some people already know a lot of this, but it's really, really important to know these basics so that you understand later on as you make things more complicated that the basics still stay the same. Your basics won't change. The concept of layers and the layer order is extremely important to understand at the beginning so that later on when we make images with 50 or 100 layers, which I've done, you'll understand why and how to find things. So when you look at things, it's from the top down. That being said, our top layer has black and white. If I go into my green layer and I select the brush tool and a nice pretty green, I don't like this red color. I'm just gonna make it, it's bothering me. Okay, so I have my brush tool. I'm gonna show you now, when I brush on it, I don't see anything. Now, if I were in like a classroom, I'd be like, why don't you think I see anything? But I can see there in the little preview that there's green. Why can't I see it here? It's because our layers are being viewed from the top down. And in the top layer, we have black and white, and it's a solid, like a piece of paper, all right? It's like a opaque sheet of paper that's on the top. If I let it go, if I say I don't want to look at you anymore, we can see the marks that we just made. Super duper important, okay? Now, what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna select my ink layer. I'm going to change the blending mode to multiply. Multiply is super handy. What it does is that it makes the lighter colors transparent and they mush. It's as if we have now turned our Christmas tree into a transparency. Okay, it's as if we photocopied it onto a transparent piece of plastic, and now that is at the top. And when the light is projected down, we can see all the layers. That's why we can see our green now, because our top layer is set to multiply. This is the easiest way to color. There are 1,000 other ways to do it, but today I'm gonna go through the easiest one just because it's the easiest. It's the one I first learned, so maybe it's not the easiest, but it's the one I learned first. Now, I don't want to accidentally change that mode. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lock this layer now. Now that it's set to multiply, don't worry, the green is in another layer. I have my ink layer selected. I'm gonna hit this little lock layer tool. So now there's a little X symbol, like this little, my kids call it the no smoking sign, even though it doesn't have a cigarette. They just know it has the no smoking sign. Magic, right? So this just prevents you from doing anything because you don't want to accidentally draw on your Christmas tree layer. If I unlocked it and I have, say, pink selected, and I think I'm in another layer, and I'm like, oh, look at this beautiful picture. And I'm like, oh, why is it covering the black and white? You know, like, that's kind of weird. And then you realize that you've ruined your ink layer, and you're like, oh, crap. So I'm just going to Control undo that. So we're going to lock it. It's set to multiply. It's locked. We can't accidentally do something to it. We get to ignore it. And we have this handy little sign that tells us we can't use the brush tool because the layer is locked. Oh, thank goodness. Don't touch that layer. It's set. Okay. I think that covers the first little bit. Now this green layer is super attractive. If you want to erase, you can hit the E button on your keyboard, or you can go over to the eraser tool. The eraser tool acts like a brush in reverse. It's gonna eliminate the actual pixels that are on your layer. And it uses brush tools as well. So if you have your eraser tool selected here, you hit the size area, you can change it, and right now mine is set to soft round, but I like to keep it to hard round. And that's just to show you that I can start erasing things now, okay? This makes it so that I don't want to have to delete the entire layer every time I don't like something on it. I just wanted to show you guys a different way to modify it. Again, if you don't like what's in this layer, you can do it quickly by doing the select all trick again, Control A, and then delete. And it doesn't delete your layer. It just deletes the information on the layer. Okay, so we want to keep our green layer because we're going to use it. But if you don't like what's on it, you just want to reset that layer without deleting the actual layer. That's one way to do it. Because using the eraser tool, if you have a really big canvas, would be a real pain in the butt. And again, remember to deselect. So Control D or select, deselect. All right, so now let's get into some fun coloring stuff. Now, if you have a tablet and you have your brush, your hard round brush, and you can change the size with the bracket keys next to the enter. I'm making it bigger and smaller by changing, I don't know what keys these are. It's a French keyboard. It's a CCD and a circonflexe, so that doesn't really help you guys. I think it's the two bracket keys that are next to the return key, the enter key. Anyway, you can either go up and down like that, or you can go into your brush and drag the slider, the size. There are a lot of ways to change your brush size. So you could go in manually, and if you really enjoy this, you've never seen Photoshop, it's fun, it's really handy. All right, so I'm in the green layer, make sure. I have my brush, I have my color. Bracket keys, thank you, Mirka, because on mine it's like crazy. You can, if you really love coloring, you can just like super zen out and like start coloring this way. Your black and whites, your black layers, your black lines are gonna stay there. You can color, and this is a more manual way to do it. This will take forever, but this is also what I use when I'm using a different kind of brush. So I'm gonna show you a couple different ways to do it. This green is obnoxious and horrible. Okay, so before we get into just mass filling everything, I'm gonna show you how to deal with different brush settings. I just changed the color. I chose a darker green. All right, so the hard round brush is just straight up like a dot, right? Like it's just a circle. It's a hard edge brush. Now, I'm gonna recommend a few things, and I'll drop the resources in my Patreon page later. I'm gonna show you the brushes I like to use. how do I get Kyle brushes in Photoshop? Kyle T, he did these beautiful brushes. There's like pastels and oils, and they mimic different real stuff. I'll find the link later and post it, but I have them already loaded. So to choose a different brush, I have Kyle's Paint Box Oil Rich Beat. You know, when you download brushes online, they have millions for free. You download them and you drop them. There's instructions on how to put them in your toolbox and stuff. The default brushes from Photoshop are not that bad, but there are nicer ones. I just want to show you how to use maybe one different one in case you want to go after this in a more traditional coloring way. I'll choose this watercolor wash brush. You can double click it or whatever, and now I have this giant brush available to me. And you can try it out, and it's got, like, depending on the settings you have active. Okay, I don't like this brush, never mind. But we're just gonna play around with different brushes and see what we like. Salty watercolor, oh. I'm gonna try the oil one, I like oil. Make it a bit smaller. Yeah, so now we have this cool texture. And don't worry too much about going over, because like I said, this is just our first layer, right? So you could be coloring around and it's like, okay, cool, I have all this stuff. If you color it solidly, you just, you know, you're not gonna see any of the texture. So what I'd recommend is, I'll show you in a second how to just fill the entire tree, and then we can go add textures with different lighter colors. Like if I wanted to grab this lighter color, a quick way to select another color is you hit Alt, and it changes, I'm not clicking, I'm only pressing the Alt key on my keyboard. And it changes to the eyedropper tool. You can also physically select the eyedropper tool. I don't really know where it is. Oh, there it is. I never use it. I never physically go and get it, but I just hit Alt, grab the lighter green, go back to brush tool. I hit B, or you can go up there. And now it's like I have this cool texture on top of, because I chose a lighter color on the darker green, and now I can do some cool effects with this oil brush. Like that. So that's, if you want to do it like the super slow way and you want to do it super meticulously, that's one way to do it. Just, it's kind of like going after it with a colored pencil kit or something, and you're treating this image more like a real drawing, right? Now for me, because I like shortcuts and doing things quickly, I'm gonna erase everything I've done so far. I still have my green layer. I just did Control A and delete, and it just, again, erases the info on there, and deselect. I'm lazy, so I'm gonna fill the whole tree in with a flat color, like a base green, a mid-tone green, and then I'm gonna go in and add some like textures and stuff. So to do that, we're gonna use the Paint Bucket tool. Now the Paint Bucket tool is right under the eraser, usually, or you can hit, I think it's G? Yeah. It used to be K, but now it's G. Paint Bucket tool, super handy. Use it all the time. Now, you could just start painting things and you're like, oh, great, I just clicked somewhere and it just filled the entire screen. Now it's making my face green too. It just filled up the entire layer because I didn't put in any parameters. I just said fill. I clicked the screen, clicked the layer, and it just filled the entire screen. And I'm just like, all right, I don't need that. So do Control Z, undo. The non-short way to do undo is edit, undo, Paint Bucket. But really, get used to shortcuts. I'm gonna tell you now. They're gonna save you so much time. Control Z. And if you're not already used to using Control Z and other things, then get used to it. All right, so with the Paint Bucket tool, by default, it just floods the screen, okay? So what we're gonna try to do is get it to listen to the black and white layer. So I'm gonna actually show you one thing before I, let me see, I'm gonna do, okay. Oopsies. I just wanted to show you, explain something before I go into actually using it, just because it'll be handy later on. So Paint Bucket tool. Now, theoretically, Control Z is king, yes. Theoretically, the Paint Bucket tool, it is as if you are physically carrying a paint bucket and you are dumping it into onto a sheet of paper or something, okay, or canvas, say. By default, it's going to, like this, let's just say this is my bucket. And it's going to, by default, just fill the entire thing, okay? So when you have a black and white layer and you want it to interact with the paint bucket, it will be as if we have like a canvas with, say, like masking tape or something. So let's just pretend this is tape. And we've taped some areas off on our canvas. I do this all the time with real paint too. And that way, when I dump my paint bucket on, it floods the canvas, but it's going to interact with the tape. So at this point, when I remove the tape, it'll be white underneath, okay? So it won't have been affected. Hi, Nick. How are you? Welcome. Just going through some paint bucket stuff. It won't be affected by the areas that were taped. You follow me? All right. So now, oopsies, I have the selection key set to a circle. Now, if we use the paint bucket tool and we have a picture instead of, and let's just pretend our picture was made of tape. Let's just do like a square. When I use the paint bucket tool and I tell it to fill inside of this square, I can get it to listen to the tape lines so that it only fills inside of that square. And that's what we're going to be doing right now, okay? Just to give you some context, because another thing is that if this were actually tape, and I only taped like this, what do you think would happen, right? It's gonna fill it, but it's gonna escape this little hole, right? This is like, it's gonna fill everything, and it won't fill where the lines are, but it will fill everything else. So if you have a piece of artwork, this is why I tend to ink my drawings very tightly, and by tightly I mean I try to make sure I close all the holes. So if I had my my Christmas tree and I didn't have these lines joined up, I have to unlock it to show you, but like if this wasn't joined, the paint bucket tool would flood the area and it would escape because it would just like run away because there's an open, it's like little floodgates are open, right? So we want to make sure the black and white line work has walls, okay? So we lock my ink layer. I'm gonna go back to the green layer. I'm gonna hit my paint bucket tool. Now we're just gonna go for it. I'm gonna choose a mid-green. I have my paint bucket tool. Now to get it to listen to those lines, what we're gonna do is we're gonna tell it to, first of all, we want it to be anti-aliased. This is a little checkbox that just means the edges of your fill will be soft instead of hard. It's hard to explain out of context, but just make sure it's selected. I can explain it another time. Contiguous means that it's going to fill sections that flow into each other. All layers means that it's going to listen to our black and white lines. Okay, so even though we're in the green layer and we want to keep the green layer selected, it's going to take note of the lines in this ink layer and it's going to fill according to that. So make sure your green layer is selected, have your paint bucket tool, select your all layers, and you're going to click in the middle here and it's only going to color in this area because it's closed. But you see the Christmas lights also close it. And it didn't get everything. And this is because these pixels, it's trying to listen to as many things as it can. And there's a thing called tolerance. So I'm going to Control Z, and the tolerance thing, the tolerance level is right now set to 8. And the tolerance means how much control the paint bucket tool has over these fuzzy pixels, okay? So if I make the tolerance 0, for example, it's only going to fill in white. It's gonna, all the JPEG pixelations, everything, it's gonna say, nope, I'm not gonna color over it because it's in my way. It's not pure white, I'm not gonna color it. So, I'm glad I helped you. I was hoping for a few moments like that during this stream. Glad to help you. So tolerance, it's funny because when I think about it, I actually relate it to a person and their temper, right? So, they have no tolerance right now, 0 tolerance. I will not tolerate fixing your picture at all. I hate your ugly, fuzzy pixels. We're not going to color them in. I don't like your messy file. That's what I think of when I set the tolerance to 0, okay? So I'm going to undo that. And back to the paint bucket tool. Now let's try it. By default, your Photoshop should have your tolerance set to 32. I don't know why. 32 bits, 32 is a magic number, right? When we try it again with tolerance at 32, it's like, it's pretty good, right? Like it's filling in most of the spots. I could probably go in and fill the rest in by myself, you know, if I'm patient. I'm not very patient. So I'm gonna undo it. Let's see what happens if we set the tolerance to 100. Yeah, that probably does the best. I don't even know if it goes over 100. Over 5,000. I think it goes up to 256. No, 255, sorry. Okay. 255 means it has all the tolerance, which means it'll ignore everything. It is so tolerant, it just ignores even your black and white lines. So we don't want it to do that. Now we're back to not even using it, okay? So that's why the default is usually pretty low. 32, 50. Set it to 50. 50 is pretty good. It's getting most of the things, okay, but not all. Fun fact, when you're using your paint bucket tool and the tolerance is set like this, around 50, if you click the same area again, go back to this physical image of the paint bucket filling the lines, okay? If you add more paint, it's gonna flood more, right? So regardless of the tolerance, if you keep adding paint, it's going to be like a puddle. Wouldn't unticking anti-alias take care of those white spaces? Let's try it. If I undo anti-alias, it won't. Anti-aliasing means that it's only gonna follow, it'll still listen to the tolerance levels, but an aliased image, okay, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe aliasing. So, okay, I'm gonna do my brush tool. Hard round, just regular. The brush tool is aliased. It is green, fading to white. It is soft. It is pixelated. It is like rasterized. It smooths out, right? So it's like the difference between a soft, chalky pastel and then a tool that is by nature not aliased is the pencil tool. And what it is just pure pixels. So if you want to do pixel art, you go to your brush and you go down to pencil tool, make it bigger. This is an anti-aliased brush. So it means on or off. It is binary, okay? So think of an alias setting as a setting that accepts and has a slow tapering, you know, yes, Milo. And anti-aliased means it's binary. It's on or off. So that means when we, okay, Milo, that's fine. That means when we're filling in something and we want it to be anti-aliased, we want it to only act in binary and on or off with a certain tolerance level. The tolerance level corresponds to a scale, like a gray scale, like a value scale. So like it'll still go over some of the pixels, but it'll do it in an anti-aliased way. So we want to keep the alias on, unless you're doing a picture that's like an 8-bit artwork or a pixel artwork where it's like, you know, like a Nintendo thing and you want everything to be super sharp, okay? Typically that's not the case. So we keep anti-alias on, tolerance to anywhere between 30 and 100. Contiguous, I'll show you what contiguous, I forget if this is a decent example. Contiguous will just fill the entire, if we turn it off, it means it's not going to listen to the sections again. So there are a lot of ways to mess this up. So we keep it on. Anti-alias on, contiguous on, all layers on. Okay, and what I was trying to get to before is that when you click, if you fill once, there's say like a few a liter of paint, and if you click again in the same area with the same settings, pay close attention to these pixels, okay? I'm gonna click again, it's filling them. I'm gonna click again, it's filling them again. It keeps filling them. I'm gonna keep clicking, and this is the max. I'm pointing at the screen like you can see me. That's the max level. It doesn't matter how many times I fill this area, it can't get those pixels. I'm just gonna click them here. But it's handy if you do this because you go into all your corners and you just fill them up. Just keep clicking. Another way to do this, if you don't want to use your fill tool, oops, actually, because that might happen. Remember this, what I said with the tape? If you use your paint bucket tool and you paint on your ink layer, and I don't mean in the space, I mean on, Do you see the difference? What happened there? I pressed undo. I'm gonna press it again. I click it and all this turns green. What it did was it took the information from the ink layer, because I told it to paint bucket all layers. What it did is if I turn off my ink layer now, I want to make it invisible, it colored all of my inks and it followed all of the layers. This is a great shortcut to, you know, coloring, making colored lines. But it's really important not to do this in this way because we don't want that. Because later on we're gonna add different colors and I don't want all my line art to be green because that's another lesson, okay? So what we want our picture to look like once we've been properly coloring in our tree things. I click once or twice because I want it to fill in. You know, I click once, it's good. I click twice, it's a bit better. I hope you guys follow what I mean. Click once, there's still a little bit of gray. I click again, it fills in a bit more, okay? And sometimes I use the brush, hard round brush, to get those little, I want to set it back to brush mode, not pencil mode, to get those little corners in. I just use my brush tool sometimes. If it's too, because I don't want to risk coloring all the line art with the paint bucket tool, so that when I unselect, when I toggle off my ink layer, it should look like this, okay? This is important if we're coloring in this way because we don't want the line art to be colored anything. We want the line art to stay clean and to be on top and locked away. It becomes more important later on, but whatever. For now, it's just keep it clean. Trust me. So that's a quick way to test to see if your image is still okay. If you did accidentally color all of your line art layer and it doesn't matter how many undos you do and it still stays because you did it like hours ago, hundreds of steps ago, don't freak out. One thing you could do is just erase it physically. You can be like, well, you know, you can use your select tool, which is here, rectangular marquee tool. I'm gonna select this area, make sure I'm in my green layer, and hit delete, and then like chunk away, like erase it. You can also use the eraser tool. You don't want that, okay? But I did it recently, so I can just step back with the zoom, with the undos. There. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and fill in the rest of, so I click once or twice, like I said, to fill in the gray areas. You could also increase the tolerance, but you don't want it to be too high. But I just click a few times and it's the same as filling it in with some chunks of paint. I think that's snow. I'll brush this in so I don't get too close. You want to get all the corners, the nitpicky corners, because later on when we start shading, they show up as being white or gray and it's ugly. So this is like a proper cleaned picture. Paint tool, paint bucket, fill it in. While I'm doing this menial work, does anyone have any questions so far? Am I going incredibly too slow? Again, I use shortcut keys like nobody's business. I'm hitting the spacebar tool to navigate. I use the brush tool. I go to Z for zoom in, zoom out. I hit Alt to zoom out, drag to the left. Use the spacebar key. Hit G again for the paint bucket tool, and I'm just clicking away. I don't know what I did here. This should be green, but then... Alright, this is a teachable moment. If I want this to be snow, I don't want this green, but it's following the line art. Thank you. Hello, Anita. Beautiful Christmas tree. Thank you. If you want to change your line art after you've already begun coloring things in, and you're like, oh crap, I actually want the snow to be, I want a line to be here, because that's what I kind of meant to do. It is possible. You can change your line art after you've started coloring. It's okay. You just have to be careful. So I'm going to turn off my green layer. You don't have to, but it just makes it easier maybe to see it. Irrelevant, doesn't have to be. I want to add a line here because I want this area here to be green, but I want these little tufts here are supposed, I drew them as snow. It's supposed to be like blobs of snow. Oops, I missed a spot. Anyway, so if I want to change the line art layer, it's totally doable. Just make sure you're in the right layer. Don't start putting black lines here when we have the green selected. So I'm gonna go over to my ink layer, click it, make it active, unlock it. Okay, so now it's editable. I'm going to select, I'm gonna hit B for my brush tool. Okay, it's already on. I'm gonna go back to black. Hit okay. And now I'm just gonna draw my black line. Make sure you're on the right layer. I'm just gonna, oops. Now make sure you have your pressure for size. Hit that up there. Do this. Actually, I don't like that. I'm gonna do this. There. So now this area on top here is gonna be, it's gonna stay green. I'm gonna lock my layer again. Locked. I'm going to go down to my green layer, make it active. And now I don't want this part green anymore, but I don't want to erase the whole thing. I don't want to toss everything I did out the window. So I'm gonna hit E for eraser. Make sure I have a nice eraser tool. Right now it's looking kind of big, so I'm gonna reduce the size. You can either hit the bracket keys. I like using the bracket keys just because it's more oopsies. Make sure you don't, if ever you're hitting tools and you're not seeing something work, it might be because you have an active text field somewhere. Just hit escape. Yeah, okay, it's an invalid one, it's fine. I don't want it. Just click out of the screen. You can use your brackets to up or down the size. Right now I have the eraser tool active, and I'm just gonna erase here the part that I didn't want to be green because we modified the line art layer, right? Okay, so I erased it, and now I'm gonna go back to my brush, select the green again, and do some touch-ups. Okay, there's some spots I missed. You can use hit G for your fill tool, fill it. Click it once or twice to see how much it'll fill. This is kind of close, kind of small, and I don't want to risk coloring all my line art again, so I'm going to switch over to my brush for this part here. Oh, there's a little spot here. Anyway, any questions, you guys? I'm probably going a little slow, but again, essentially, you would be able to color the entire image now with the information I've given you, right? So you can fill things in. You can make it nice and clean. You can shade it. I'm gonna give you some more shortcuts though. This is not the end. Just gonna make sure it's all filled in. It's all good, Sally. Actually, this is supposed to be snow here, so I'm gonna go back into my ink layer, unlock it, select black. Oh, shortcut key for resetting your palette. Did you see here how I have green selected? If I just want it black and white, which is a good edit mode for when you're drawing, if you have nothing else selected, you just hit the D key on your keyboard, it's gonna default to black in the foreground and white in the background. That's like a super great shortcut I use all the time when I'm coloring, especially with black and white. I hit D and it's just gonna go back to black and white. Again, that's probably not the same for GIMP or any other software, but for me, I use that all the time when I'm switching back and forth between coloring and doing line art. So I hit D, and sometimes I do it without thinking, so I have to stop myself sometimes. I hit D, and now I know I have black selected again, and I'm just gonna round this off because I had wanted this to be snow. I have like these two lines here. So like that, make sure I'm in my inks layer. Yep. Now I'm gonna lock the ink layer back up, go back to my green layer, hit the E key, which means eraser, or you can go over here into your toolbar and get your eraser out. And we're gonna erase the snow on this little spot because I didn't actually want it there. I wasn't crazy too accurate. It is for Medibang Pro. Excellent. I love it when things are the same. Okay, I'm going to grab my eyedropper tool, color in the rest of this tree. Okay. Getting all the little nooks and crannies. Now, it's really important to get all of the little nooks and crannies for later on. I'm going to show you some masking and layer layer masking, clipping techniques, layer clipping, to add some cool textures. So, but for now, just make sure all of your sections are colored and done, clean. Again, I work really quickly. I'm just, hopefully you guys can at least keep up with the concepts. Again, doing something like this would take me, I don't know, hours when I first started. So really don't feel like, because I'm entirely using my keyboard shortcuts, okay? So it really does help you save time. It might take a little while to memorize them at first, but you can even put them across like on a piece of tape on your tablet or on your monitor and just say, you know, B for brush, E for eraser, D for default color, that kind of thing. I'll put those in the notes on Patreon. If you are just joining, I don't know how many viewers there are because I don't have the viewer thing open, but I just wanted to let you guys know, since we're about an hour and 20 minutes, about an hour into the actual, oh, you don't need to see that. That's my email. I wanted to link you guys to Patreon again, just for any new people popping in. For notes and the recording of this class, I am not going to let this class stay as a recorded class on Twitch because I want to use it as repertoire for my Patreon classes, okay? So I wanted to let you know that for $2 a month, you can get access to all of my recorded classes through Patreon, okay? I have mostly traditionally painted stuff. There. So I have different, I have a lot of recorded classes for painting, but I'm gonna be developing more for Photoshop as well. For $7 a month, you get the private lessons that I do once a month, which are like one through Google Meet. So it's like a private link, and then you guys can talk, and I can see your video, you can see mine, and I teach you. And similar for the 20 a month, but the 20 a month includes the separate stuff like a print, and you get like a private tutorial session once a month where you can like talk about a project you might be thinking of. It's kind of like a mentorship thing. I just haven't quite fleshed it out because no one's chosen it yet. But the most popular ones are the $2 and the $7 one because it gives you access to these classes. And when I record this class, I'm going to put it on Patreon and I'm going to have the notes. So all of the stuff I'm rambling on about, you can have as like, you know, like the images I'm using to show you guys different concepts and stuff too, okay? Yes. Let's move on. So right now we have one layer. It is the green layer. It is beautiful. Let's fill out other stuff. I'm not going to color the entire image with you guys because that would probably take quite a few hours. So I'm going to go over how to do the background. It'll also be an important lesson on how to color white, because white is tricky to color because the top layer, it looks white. Like right now the snow looks white, but for real this is a multiply layer and this is the background. So this is actually the only information that we're dealing with right now. It's just the green on top of transparent. So I'm gonna color the background and we're gonna do a neat kind of like, I can cover some gradient tools settings. We're gonna make a nice sunset in the background, okay? It's not really sunset hour, but we're gonna pretend that it almost is. And this will just be a good teachable for some color settings and to learn how to use gradients. Gradients are under the paint bucket tool because it is all about filling mass amounts of color. So I'm gonna go to my paint bucket tool and I'm gonna hold it down. So, and see here, it says gradient. That's actually the original shortcut key. You think you missed the beginning, you don't know how you even got to Photoshop? Well, I've been using Photoshop myself since like 8th or 9th grade, so like since 1998, 1999. Photoshop itself can be purchased through Adobe. It is either a monthly subscription or a yearly subscription. You can get just Photoshop, or you can get all the other programs that are also used with it, such as Illustrator, which is used for vector artwork and graphics. I use Adobe Premiere for video editing. It's software. Yeah, I wouldn't say, I guess it's an app. I don't like using the word app, but like it's a program on my computer, right? So if you go to Adobe, you just search Adobe Photoshop It's going to bring you to adobe.com. It is software by Adobe, and it is you can buy it. Yeah, so you can get a free trial. Actually, I should have mentioned that in the whatever, but you can get a free trial, see if it's for you. There are free options such as this. That's what we were discussing before. So Mirka and JDub, they were saying different options for different programs. There's also GIMP. GIMP is a free photo editing software. It just has different oopsies. Yeah, you can download it. They're all just different tools for dealing with images. But we are using Photoshop. Good question though. Good question. All right, so let's go into gradients. I'm gonna use the background layer for the gradients. So I have my background layer selected, and I have the paint bucket tool. If you hit Shift and G, it's gonna scroll through the different tools that are available in this section. So I'm gonna choose gradient. Now by default, I don't really know what it has by default, but if you click the little gradient picture up there, here, I'll do it again just in case you missed it. This is like our main toolbar, right, for our options. And this is the preview of what colors we have. If you notice, it has green on the left and white on the right. And that's because it corresponds to our small little palette here, which is green on the top and white on the bottom. So it goes from green to white. That's that. A gradient is a flood of color transitioning from one color to another. It is solid, unless otherwise stated. It is opaque, which means that if I flood the canvas with these colors, here, I'm gonna make the other layers invisible for now, just to give you an idea. If I just click it, nothing happens. I have to click one point and drag, and then let go, and it'll make a gradient based on the pattern I've selected. There are five different settings. I'm gonna do Control Z. I prefer to use the straight one, which is like linear. Yes, linear gradient. I hit Shift, and then I click, and it forces it to be right or 45-degree angles if I hit Shift. If I don't hit Shift, it'll let me do anywhere. And that pretty much applies for a lot of things in Photoshop. If you want it to be forcefully done with a straight line, you hold down Shift. And if I let go, it's gonna do a gradient. It's the green, the front color is gonna be as far as how I did the first line here. So if I want it to be all the way down, then the green extends from the top all the way to fading at the bottom. All right, so for our Christmas tree thing, I'm gonna click this gradient up here, and it's gonna ask, okay, this is your gradient editor. There are some presets. Some of them I see way overused online. People just go straight for the presets, and they're like, oh, I just wanna use rainbow. And it gives you this preset of all these rainbow colors. It's really great, but they have some stuff saved for you. There's some cool stuff in here. I'm not gonna use any of the presets in case you guys are not actually using Photoshop, so. What I'd like it to do, here you can see, remember when we talked about before how the checkerboard means transparent? This means that this type of gradient here says foreground to transparent, and that just means if I use this, instead of being a solid flood of color from green to white, it would be a semi-transparent gradient from solid to transparent. I'm gonna go back to the first one because I just want it to stay foreground to background because that really is the best for what I'm doing right now. Say okay, really nothing changed. All right, I'm gonna say I want the sky to be a dark bluish purple. Let's say okay. And I did that by clicking the front square here, down here. Ooh, my little palette. And I want the color that it fades to. I'm gonna click the background square. Let's just say I want it to be more sunsetty, so maybe a pink. We'll see. Actually, I want the top color to be more blue. Whatever, you guys can play around with it too. So here I have this fade. It shows me a preview of what the gradient will look like. So I'm gonna click, I'm in the background layer, okay? And I have my gradient set. I'm gonna click on the top, hit Shift. You don't have to hit Shift. This is what happens when you hit it. This is what happens when you don't. Drag it all the way to the bottom. And then we have this cool gradient. Now, I want my ink layer back, so I'm going to turn it on. That already looks pretty cool. Just saying, you can use this for something, right? Because we have it set to multiply. We have our ink layer set to multiply, right? Remember? If you set it to normal, it'll just be the regular JPEG that we had at the beginning. Keep it to multiply, keep it locked. I'm just reminding you. If we turn on our green layer, there's our green, okay? So now you know what I mean when I said that the white doesn't really, we didn't physically put white on our image. And when we set a line art layer that is black and white to multiply, everything on the lighter spectrum turns transparent, which is super handy when we're coloring in a picture, but now it's like, oh no, now I have to recolor in all my white, which is fine. You'd have to do that either way eventually. So now we're gonna make a new layer. So we have our background layer, has a beautiful gradient. Our ink layer is locked. Our green layer is in the middle. I'm gonna make a new layer for snow. Okay, so our snow is gonna be these little patches here. I'm gonna hit the new layer button at the bottom right next to the trash can. And it's just gonna be layered number 1. For the love of God, please name your layers. Once you have an image file that has 100 layers, it becomes insane. It might not feel like very important at first, but especially for this layer, if I didn't name it and I just started coloring white snow in here, can you see it here in the snow preview? No, you can't, but there is something there. So it's really important to name your layers because you can't actually see the preview all the time. You feel targeted. You guys already know how to color though. I feel like you should already be putting this into practice. Name your layers. All right, so I have my snow layer selected. And I'm gonna hit the paint bucket tool. Oops, I have to put it back to paint bucket. Click in my snow. Real quick. Now it's nice and easy. I can see what I want to color in. It's gonna color in all my snow. There we go. So really you can do this until your whole picture is colored in. You make a new layer, you get your paint bucket tool, you color stuff in. It's super, super easy. And just make sure you make a new layer for every individual item that is either a different color or a different structure altogether. Now, I undid this really quick, but if you saw, I had the paint bucket and I clicked the line art again, and see how it made this disgusting white outline on everything? That's because I clicked the black lines with my paint bucket tool. Now, if I unclick the ink layer, look what it did. Remember? We don't like that. I mean, it's pretty cool. You could use that. It looks pretty awesome, but that's not what we're going for today. So I'm gonna undo that. Just make sure when you're coloring stuff in that you're staying in the blank space and not on the lines. Okay, it's 3:32. I said about 2 hours. So let's cover, we did gradients. Let's do some shading, okay? And then after the shading, we can do some textures like promised, some clipping layer effects, and I think that should be enough for today. Yeah, I think so. All right, so for shading, so many ways to shade. Let's shade our beautiful green boughs. Okay, save. Oh my gosh, save your file. Yes, Control S, file, save. I didn't even save it once, but sometimes it auto saves depending on the program you have. God forbid you forget to save while you're working. Just save. Things crash all the time. Luckily, nothing has crashed today. Okay, so. Oh, I forgot. I missed a spot. In the green. You can always go back if you missed a spot. You know, just make sure you're in the right layer when you do it. Otherwise, if I start putting, like if I'm in the green layer and I'm like, oh, I want to fill in a bit of snow. Let's pretend, you know, this is snow right here, and I start filling in snow and I'm like, oh look, I'm being so good at filling all of my snow. And then later on you're like, okay, well it looks okay, but if we wanted to say to change the color of the green, and then we turn off the green layer and half of our snow disappears, yeah, that's what happens. But play around with your layers, look at them as you go. It's a good reminder. Okay, we're gonna undo that. Oh, that actually made me think of something else I wanted to show you. Okay, next, yeah, shading, right. I know I've seen your bot, Mirka, during your streams remind you, hey, what layer are you on? It's so essential. All right, so I want to start shading the green. let's pretend I don't like the color of the green right now as a whole, and I just want to have a new baseline. There are a lot of ways to change all of that coloring without going back through with the paint bucket in every individual spot, okay? So say I wanted to make the green, I wanted to make it a nicer, especially now that I've changed the background, it kind of changes the feel of the image, right? So maybe I want more of a blue pine. And like, oh, I think I would like this nice teal color better. And you're like, ah, crap. I gotta color it all in separately with all those little thingies? That would take forever. We're not gonna do that. Okay, so what I did, the contiguous thing comes in handy in this point. I'm gonna make it a more different color though, because it's really hard to see the difference there. Look at this light turquoise cyan color. So let's just say I wanna change all the colors of all the boughs at the same time. Now that I have the active information, now that I have the actual pixels colored in, when I use the paint bucket again, it's gonna include that into its thinking when I say color all layers, color using the information from all layers up here. So if you remember before, we did that to have it follow the white space in between the black lines. But now that we have this green layer active, and we already have boughs, like the green colored in there, if I click it once here, it's just gonna recolor all the green within those boundaries because the black lines are still really hard boundaries, okay? If I want it to fill in everything in this layer that is colored the same way, I unclick contiguous, because contiguous means is that it only colors in pixels that are connected to each other. If I unclick that, now when I click somewhere on my tree, it'll do all of it at once, which is wonderful, okay? That's really handy if I know exactly what color I want to do. Another way to change all the colors at once in one layer, this is why you want to isolate the colors between your layers, because say if I just went and colored, for example, all the ornaments. Oopsies, don't listen to that. Go back to contiguous. Say I wanted to color all the ornaments and I'm in the same layer and I'm like, oh, this is a great color combo. I love it so much. Just coloring all the ornaments pinkish magenta. And then you're like, oh, I kind of want to recolor all the green. Yeah, and then like you turn off contiguous. Well, it sort of sticks to the similar colors. Look at me, it's calling me a liar. That's okay. But it's not, later on you'll see like it's important to separate them. That was a bad example, I'm sorry guys. You'll see later what I mean. So I'm gonna keep the ornaments in a separate layer. We haven't even done it yet. Going back to what I said about changing all of the pixels at the same time, let's just say I have it like this dark green because it's still set to not color contiguously. Another way to change all the colors at once, I have my green layer selected. Do you remember back when we used the adjustments? We're gonna go to layer, image, adjustments, and hue, saturation. Hue saturation lets us kind of preview a different color instead of having to go and like, oh, I don't know if I want light green or dark green or blue or pink or white, okay? So this is a good way to preview it live before you commit to a color. So I'm in my green layer, I have it selected. I went to image, adjust hue saturation. And I wanna click this little button here that says preview, okay? Click the preview button. That means it'll change live while you're looking at things. Now the hue slider is gonna change the actual physical color of your thing, of your pixels, on this layer only. So I'm gonna drag it over here, and you see the tree is changing color. Now it's this lovely deep blue-green. Drag it some more, it turns purple. It's just gonna follow the spectrum. It's gonna keep going. Yellow, maroon. I know my colors. And it continues it on the other side. So I'm dragging it. It turns red. I don't want it green. You know, I don't want it red. I don't want it pukey colored. I really love this, this nice teal, this dark, rich pine color. You say, okay, that's cool. I like that, but it's a little dark. Is it? I don't know. Let's just pretend I thought it was a little dark. You can change the lightness, okay? Make it lighter. It doesn't mean brighter. It means lighter. It means physically adding more light, not intensity of color. So what it's doing is it's washing it out. Pretend it's a watercolor and you're adding more water and it's becoming lighter, not brighter, okay? And darker just means like it's less light is present until you go all the way black. So I'm gonna keep that, and that default was fine, around 0. Now, if you want to make the colors more intense and also lighter, then you change the saturation. Saturation means the amount of hue that is present. So a saturated color, I love saturated colors. I paint in saturated colors. It's not subdued. It's not subtle at all. I like bright, loud colors. But if you don't, you can desaturate it. And when you drag it more to the gray side, that's desaturating it, and it gets a bit grayer. And if you saturate it, it makes it brighter. It's intensifying the color. This is as saturated as it can get. If you want to make it lighter and more saturated, you can drag the lightness as well. Okay, so play around with the sliders. Find something that really the best way to learn is just to do it, just to play around with these things, because you don't know what you're going to get. And it's in a separate layer. It's okay. If you say cancel, it won't apply the changes, and that's fine. You know, if you don't want to do all that craziness. But I kind of liked it, so teal, maybe a bit brighter. Okay, and I hit okay. All right. So next, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you how to color it in without leaving the lines. Okay. So what we're gonna do is I should probably have some kind of notification in case you're only half listening, like, hey, we're doing another concept. Pay attention if you want. We're going to learn how to do preserve transparency. Preserving transparency means locking transparent pixels. That means you are letting every area that is colored to be changed and every area that is not colored to be locked. Okay, so it's like we're only changing things that already have information in them. This is probably, it'll only make sense once you see it, maybe. So I have my green layer here. I'm going to click this little checkerboard thing that when I click it, it says it has locked the transparent pixels and this little lock symbol appears, but it's a see-through lock, okay? It's only half there. It's like, I'm a little locked, but not all the way, okay? So it's, you know, tolerant. So what that does is super, super handy. We're gonna switch over to our brush tool. I'm gonna use the eyedropper tool, hit Alt next to your keyboard, spacebar, click the color. It picks up this new color because remember we changed the pine needle colors using the slider. So I don't have that swatch saved yet. So it's just this random color up here. If you wanna add it to your swatches, you go down to swatches and then you hit this little new swatch button and I want to name it. Oh, what do you want to name your new color? Oh, I want to name it Kina Tree Green. You can delete it at any time. It's inconsequential. But now it adds it to your swatches so that later on, if you want to grab that color later, you don't have to find it with the eyedropper tool, or maybe you accidentally deleted your layer and you selected a new color and it's all gone. Anyway, swatches are great. Okay, now I want my color picker, so I click my little thing, and I want a color that's slightly lighter, not too light, maybe up here. I like that it compares them because I can actually see a live version of what it'll look like of one color on top of the other, and I hit OK. Now we have our transparent pixels locked, and we have our brush tool. I'm gonna pick a nice oil brush, I don't know, whatever. What this magical lock transparent pixels does is that it lets us color in the lines. I am moving my hand all over the picture and it is only coloring on the spot that I want. It's magical. So now you can go in and like be all fancy, right? You can be like, oh, I can use full brush strokes and it can look nice. And it's okay if I wander off, because there are lines and it is transparent and it is locked. So that's awesome, right? So now we can add all these cool things and it's only gonna touch our green layer, which is great because I don't wanna mess up my snow. I don't wanna put it in the background. Anyway, that's a thing. So I'm gonna do that. Really messy. This is definitely showcasing my drawing talents right now, for sure. Okay. So also, if through the Patreon, if you decide to subscribe, you'll have access to this file. I'm gonna save this Photoshop file as is with all the layers, and you will be able to download it from Patreon, and you can mess around with it and see the settings I had. Super handy if you're trying to learn it. You can pick it apart and do all those things. Okay, so let's color in our snow. So I'm gonna go to the snow layer. I want a nice snow. If the sky is blue and purple right now, the shading color of our snow would probably be closer to purple. So I'm gonna choose this nice little off pink color. I have my snow layer selected. I'm gonna hit preserve transparency, and then you can shade your snow if you want. Like that. Like such. And so on. All right, another way to do this, if you want to be able to individually grab your shading and not have it, like say if I use my eraser tool now, I'm like, oh, I don't like that, and I erase this, it's black. That's weird. That's because I have my transparent pixels locked. So what it's doing, it can't remove information. So what it does is that it just uses whatever color is in my background palette, which is black right now. So I'm gonna undo that. If you want to erase things, it doesn't quite work in this way. You have to color on top of it. So I have to select white and then color it. So that's another thing to note if you're transparent, if your pixels are locked. If I undo the lock pixels and I hit erase, it's gonna erase it, but it's gonna show, you know what it's gonna show? It's gonna show the layer underneath the snow, which is the background layer, right? So feel free to play around, please do, with the different layers and to see what works how. We're just stacking them all up right now. Okay, I'm gonna show you, because essentially you could color a whole picture this way. I'm gonna show you one more way to shade, and that is by making individual layers that you can actually modify on their own, and we're gonna group them. So let's just say, I'm going to, if I want to flatten out all this, I'm in my green layer. I want to get rid of all this shading that I did. I'm just going to use the paint bucket tool everywhere. I'm just going to take a giant brush and paint over it all. I'm going to show you a different way how to shade. This could be handy if you want control over the separate sections of where you're shading and highlighting and you don't want to do it all in one layer. In this case, what you do is you take your layer, hit Control G, or you drag it to this little folder and it makes a group. And now you have a group. And you can color your group too. If you right click your group, I'm gonna say I wanna make this group green. And then when you hit this little arrow, it collapses the group. So now I have the green, my pine tree layer inside this group, which I'm just gonna call tree, front tree, I don't know. Name your groups too. So now, this is like a little subfolder squashed in between, but it's still in the same order, okay? So when I expand it, there's only one layer inside. I want to put a layer on top of it and a layer on the bottom. So I'm going to name the top layer highlights. And I'm going to get this bottom layer and drag it underneath the green and say, actually no, we don't want it underneath. The green should be the bottom. Shadows. All right, so now I have a highlights layer, which is empty, but inside of the front of the tree group, and a shadows layer. So in the highlights layer, I'm going to put my highlights. I'm going to color in my tree stuff. Get a nice lighter color and do what I did before, which is like so, like that. Do some really crude shading. Hopefully, oh right, I forgot to tell you. Okay, this will be the good intro for clipping masks. So because I'm not coloring in the green layer right now, it can go outside the lines, right? Because I'm not using the transparent lock pixels because I'm in a new layer. I'm in a totally new layer. It's floating on top. There are no restrictions on it. Like if I make everything else invisible, like it's just this, right? I'm just adding pixels into this highlights layer. Now, there is a reason why I would want to do this. If I just colored a bunch in the highlights layer, and now I'll color a bit in the shadows layer. So if you see my shadows layer is on right now, I can color some shadows in, like that. So that looks pretty cool. But again, it can leave. It's very easy to make a mistake. If I want separate layers to interact with a base layer, we're gonna use something called clipping masks. Okay. So let me just get a few shadows in there. I'll be messy about it too, just to prove my point. So I added some stuff in the shadows layer, and I was really messy on my highlight layer. I'm like, okay. But we took so much care and attention to make our base green, and that work will not go unnoticed. So what we do now, our green layer here, our tree layer, is the guide. We want all the other pixels in this group to follow the guide. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna do it with the shadows. I'm gonna right click shadows layer. I'm gonna right click it not on the thumbnail and not on the text. Well, text is actually okay. I'm gonna right click it over here. This is something that's really annoying about Photoshop, is that depending on where you click on certain things, it activates different menus, which is, I'm used to it, but for someone starting out, it could be so frustratingly confusing. I'm gonna right click to the right of all this on the shadows layer, and I'm gonna say create clipping mask. Okay, so what it does, very, very important. There's a little arrow here, and it's pushed off to the side. Now all of these layers are already pushed off to the side because they're inside of this group, okay? But now it's pushed off to the side again with a little arrow saying the shadows layer now listens to the green layer. This means that it will stay on the active pixels of the green layer. Oh, he did everything on the same layer? There is a way to undo, you can, all right, let me get back to that, okay? I'm gonna explain clipping masks, and then I'll explain how we can separate it all. You'll have to be patient though. But I will get to it, don't let me forget. In the meantime, if you want to try what I'm doing, unselect your color layer, or maybe just, make it invisible and then start over a new tree, just for now, if you want to test out the clipping mask settings. And then we'll go back to separating an oops layer, okay? But I'm gonna keep going with the clipping masks for the moment. So the shadows layer right now is corresponding to the green, because we were so careful with our green, making sure it was in the lines and being super precise. We do the same thing with the highlights. You can say create clipping mask, and now it also follows the green, the base layer. So now it got rid of all, like it didn't erase it, it just made it invisible. It made it so that it's a clipping mask. So here, I'll show you real quick. A clipping mask, the idea. So we have, all right, we have a shape. Actually, it's probably a bad idea. I'll do it 3D because it might make more sense. We have a clipping mask. So this is our shape, a beautiful shape. This is the background. I guess that's the layer background. It's 3D, okay? Hopefully you understand. This is the guide layer, or guide shape, or whatever. And then, say we have like a blob of paint that's falling down onto this guide, okay? If we tell it to just act normally, it's gonna do what we saw before and just be, so this is like the 3D view, and this is top down, would just look like this. We would only see the blob, right? Hopefully you guys are following. So this is like the 3D view. If you see it separated into layers, there's the guide layer and then the messy art paint. Now, making a clipping mask, what it does is that it kind of lets all of this paint fall, but it only keeps the paint that falls onto this shape. So all of a sudden, it's gonna be this new color because it's on top, but it's gonna follow the shape of the heart because it's acting like it's masking it. It's preventing the messy art from being visible. It's only keeping the pixels from the above one based on the guide underneath, okay? This is important when we start adding different textures. So my highlights layer and my shadow layer are being masked by, like, they are masking the shape. They're like wrapping it up, and everything else gets tucked away or it's invisible. Now, the reason I wanted to show you this is so that we can do some cool textures for the ornaments, okay? So I'm gonna make a new layer. Sarah, if you wanna follow along for the next step, just make a new layer for your ornaments, okay? I'm gonna fill in my ornaments any old color, something bright so that I can tell what it is. Oop, name your layer. Ornaments. I'm gonna make it a group as well. I'm gonna hit Control G and call the group ornaments. Okay, I'm gonna color it too, just because I can. Make it red. So now you can see we have our ink layer, our ornaments group, which we can collapse or expand. We still have our snow layer, which is there and locked, and then we have our tree. Okay, ornaments are on top right now. I'm gonna highlight my ornaments layer. This will be the base guide. Get my paint bucket tool, any old color, okay? Right now I chose red, just because, or magenta, I guess, just because it's really visible. I'm gonna color in all of them. For the sake of the example, I'll just color in one, okay? For now. Yes. Maybe a few. I don't know, okay. Not all of them though. How about I'll just do like, sorry guys, you're seeing me think out loud here. I didn't prep this in advance, so it's like I wanted it to be on the fly based on if anyone had any questions. I didn't want it to be super structured in case people had random things they wanted to learn. All right, so I have some of my ornaments colored. It's an obnoxious color. I want to get a really cool texture to put on top of it. Now, because we learned so nicely about clipping masks, what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab a cool texture from the internet, and it's probably going to be not... The thing you have to be careful with grabbing textures online is that some of them are copyrighted. The images are copyrighted. You could use your own textures. You can scan images, you can take photos, you can whatever. So let's pretend I was really thrifty and took a picture of some wrapping paper. Images. Good old Google Images. All right, so when we're using textures, we want a flat image that repeats typically. We want it flat, we don't want it 3D because we're gonna be treating it like a skin for our ornaments, okay? This is a really fast way to do it. I'm gonna pick a cool picture, like these are cool, gold foil wrapping paper. This is 400 pixels wide. Depending on your image, it may or may not be big enough. Ooh, I like the stars. Ooh, this is pretty. Okay, this one's cool, I like this. I'm just straight up gonna copy it. We're learning here. Don't sell this image. Don't get sued. You know, typically if you use it and it's not for commercial purposes, it's okay. But I also just want to show you the concept of clipping masks. So, all right, we have a nice gold picture in the memory, in the clipboard memory. And we have our ornaments that we want to make gold. Now, the only reason I colored these in is to make those pixels active so we could create that mask, okay? So now if I hit edit paste, paste, it's just gonna stick it anywhere. Now you might already have an idea of where we're going with this. Now, because I had my ornaments layer selected, when I hit paste, Control V, or edit paste, it put it in right on top of the ornaments layer. If you paste it up here, remember it's the order and how we're looking down. So we're looking top down from the layer panel. So right now the wrapping paper is at the top because I dragged it up to the top here. It's still red because it originated inside the ornaments folder and it carries that folder color with it. If you want to change the color, you can just say no color. But I kind of want it to be red, so it's okay. So right now it's a top-down image and it's just almost 4 o'clock. So this will be the last thing I show you guys. I want to drag it into my ornaments layer. And now you can see that the black and white is on top of it because it's set to multiply. Our Christmas tree is still set to multiply, right? Take your layer 1, and we're gonna do the same thing that we did to the highlight and shadow. We're gonna right click this, rename it first. Gold patterns. I'm gonna right click it and do create clipping mask. Now, if you see here, it's only gonna be active on top of the parts that we did of the ornaments. Now, Why aren't all of my ornaments colored? Because our picture was only this big. So a good test is like, okay, well, I can make it stretch over all of them, or what I can do is I can duplicate it, I drag it, and make it repeat. I'm hitting Control and Shift to make it go sideways. Now I have 2 gold layers. I'm gonna do it again. Select both of them, drag to duplicate, drag to the new layer, and I hit Control Shift to make it go up. And now I have a texture that sort of looks like it repeats, but we have 4 layers of it. That's stupid, that's like way too much. So I select all of these by clicking, click again to select the one underneath, click again to select the other one, and the 4th one. Now we're gonna merge them. So to merge them, you can hit Control E, or you can go to Layer, Merge Layers that are selected, okay? Don't do Merge Visible, because then it's gonna merge your entire picture. Everything that you see will be stuck as one layer. So we merge layers. So now if we turn on and off this gold pattern layer, it's just the gold pattern, okay? Keep it active, make it visible, and then we do the create clipping mask again, and now you can see that all of the ornaments that I colored in have that texture on them. Now this texture is probably not the best, but you can see that it did put it in all of them that were colored. Like that. Now just a note, if we didn't color in our ornaments very well in the first place, like let's just say you were not very picky about how detailed your fill was when you were coloring in your ornaments and you were really quick and sloppy, or if you did anti-aliased or something, or like let's just say you have a spot that's missing. If I erase, I'm using the erase tool in the ornaments layer to show you this. If I didn't color it in properly, and then I hit the, and I make the pattern layer visible again, see how it only fills in the active pixels. And instead of making the background the ornament color, it's the background of my entire canvas, okay? So it really makes, and to fix that, you just go back into your ornament layer and you make it any color, like you just add it. But see, if I make it too big, it's revealing all of it. Play around with the mask, it's a lot of fun. You can add all sorts of textures, you can do all sorts of weird things. But yeah, that's masks. All right, so that's all I'm gonna show you guys for today. It's a ton of information. I'm going to show, you can feel free to stick around. I'm just gonna show Sarah Cat Brains how to piece apart her beautiful picture that she smashed all into one layer. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm going to, it's a really rough way to do it. Honestly, you might be better off starting from scratch, but for the sake of showing you, yeah, no problem. Thanks for hanging out, guys. It's a lot of info. I'll put if you subscribe to Patreon, you get the source file and notes. And again, if you just do even just the $2 a month thing, you'll get access to all of my recorded classes and all the future ones. Anyway, so, proceeding. Fascinating. Oh, I'm so glad. So glad you like it. I'm gonna stick around to show you how to take apart some layers. Basically, we do what we did, but backwards. I'm sorry I didn't take a break. Normally a 2-hour class, I would have taken a 10-minute break at an hour in, but I'm just so into this, I can't stop. Soup is tasty. All right. Sarah, do you need a break before I explain this to you? I'm gonna pretend that, see you later, Sally. Thanks for hopping on. I think you'd rather see it now than go cook. All right, I hear ya. Yeah, it's almost dinner time. Well, sorta. I'm gonna real quick color in some, the star. I'm gonna do it all in one layer to kind of mimic what you have. The reason why it doesn't color all the way to the bottom is because it's also listening to the gradient in the background. But typically it would be like that. I'm gonna show you I guess the easiest way would would be good. See, I didn't close this tree trunk layer, so now that actually bothers me because I've tried to color this image digitally a few times and I didn't close this tree trunk. So you have to like go in there manually. Ugh, it's okay. I'm glad you found it very helpful. I really hope I didn't go too slow or too fast. Again, if you have a specific thing you want to learn, please let me know. And I'll try to make it short and sweet. Like, hey, I want to learn how to color. Like, even if you have a sample picture, you say, I really like how they did this, how do I do that? I'd be glad to go over that too on Twitch and anytime. Totally. Thanks for coming. Alright, so let's just say I have this beautiful picture and I colored it all in one layer because I was so into it. I was just, you know, chilling out and enjoying vibes and music, and I didn't think about naming layers and coloring things. Okay, beautiful. Now I'm gonna flatten it. Actually, before I do that, I'm gonna save it as something different so that I have something to show you guys later. Christmas tree pics. Go on, Photoshop. Save your thing. Alright, so your picture should look something like this. Your layers. Anyway. Sarah, do you have your background as a separate color? Or is it really all flat? Like, is everything flat except for the inks? Okay. Well, that makes it a little bit easier. Okay. So, one way to separate it out is to use the lasso tool. The lasso tool is a selection tool. It lets you make selections that aren't just rectangles or squares or circles. So I have my main layer, which is like most of it, and I'm gonna hit L, and it'll show me this little lasso. You can either do a regular lasso, which is like when you test it out, you use your tablet or whatever, your mouse, to make a selection, and that's the area that it selects. Okay, you can also use the polygonal lasso too. Blah, blah, blah. That's a mouthful. Polygonal lasso tool, which is handy when you don't have a tablet, but it also just makes straight lines. So you cut, you do this kind of action here, like that, and then it grabs selection. Now, because I'm in the ornaments layer, the selection it grabs, I'm gonna use this little move tool, and it's gonna take off things. Okay. Now, this is not a very accurate selection, clearly, but it gets the point across so that these are the active pixels. One way to bring it into another layer is you have it active, and then you right-click. Oh, sorry. You right-click on your layer, and you say, oh, sorry. Oh, is it not letting me? Hang on. All right. So if you have your selection tool, your rectangular marquee tool selected after you make your selection, you right-click inside your selection, and you say layer via cut. What that's going to do, if you select that, now we have two layers. We have our original layer and this. Now we have two layers. And this top one is the selection layer, and it cut it out and put it in its own separate layer. Now that would be great, except for it's a really ugly selection, right? I just showed it to you to explain the concept. If you want a more accurate selection, what I would do is I would turn off the color, select my ink layer. Now what we can do is to get the magic wand tool, which is kind of like the lasso tool, but it will select things in the same way that the paint bucket tool acts, by following the lines. That's what we want it to do. So you hit your magic wand tool, which is W, the shortcut, or just right here underneath the lasso tool. We just want the regular magic wand. Okay. I have my inks layer selected. I'm not going to sample all layers. I only want it to listen to the black and whites. So if I just want to select our middle tree, this might take a little longer, but there are so many ways to do it, but I'm just going to show you this way. I have my ink layer selected, magic wand tool, tolerance at 32, everything's default, anti-alias is on, contiguous is on. I'm not sampling all the layers. Now I'm going to click all of the things inside of the front tree. I'm going to click the star selected. Okay. Now, magic wand still selected. I hit shift and a little plus sign is going to appear. See that? Toggle it on and off. This is on, off, on, off. I hit on and then I click to another area of the tree and I click again. And now we have two things selected. We have the star selected and a little stick underneath. I'm going to keep going throughout everything that I want to separate. So if you just wanted to separate your star, let's just take the star first, okay? We make our ornament, our main flat layer visible. I'm going to activate it. See how it's still selected? Do the thing again where you have your selection tool, your marquee tool selected, and then you right click on the star, layer via cut. It's going to make a new layer, name it star. And now if I unselect it, now the star is in its own layer. Okay? So you have to keep doing that. That's one way to do it. I like to turn it off just so I only see the ink layer. So I'm gonna go back and do it again, but for the tree bits. So I'm going to inks layer, magic wand, W, and again. I'm gonna select this blob, hit shift, select the next blob, shift is still held down, select the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and so on. So now I have all this selected. I go back to my color layer, I turn it on, I'm zooming out a bit, I hit M for the marquee tool, right click inside of it, and say layer via cut. If I do layer via copy, it's going to do what you think. It's going to make a new layer, but it's also going to keep the information underneath as well. We want to do cut so that it isolates it and picks it up and brings it to its own layer. Like that. And we rename it, so like tree stuff. And now we test it, turn it off, and back on, off, on. It's very time consuming, right? That's why I really stress putting everything in its own layer right at the beginning. Now, if you leave your color layer on and you're in the inks selected and you start selecting your snow, you can also do that if it makes it easier to see. Oh, I just want to grab all the white bits. Like that. You grab all the snow off of your tree. So I'm hitting shift and clicking on all the snow. This is a bit of a complicated image. It's not super cut and dry. Like there are a lot of little nooks and crannies. And then I'm gonna go back to the ornaments layer. See, the reason I switch between the inks layer and the ornaments layer is that I want the magic wand tool to listen to the inks, not to the colors. And that's why I have the layer that is selected. That is the layer that it is listening to. It is listening to the outlines of the ink layer. And then I say, okay, now I want you to activate and deal with the pixels on the ornaments layer. And I hit the select tool, right click, layer via cut. I rename it snow. Does that help? Hopefully it helps. It takes practice, and like I'm just really used to it, so it's okay, good. Now, it might be tricky for some layers if the black lines don't close, because then the magic wand tool won't know what to do. So like here, like the tree trunk, I clearly messed up here. I didn't color it all the way. One way you can do it is like fill in those black lines like we did before. Or if I just want to grab this tree trunk and I just want to physically grab it, I use the lasso tool. And for this, it doesn't matter what layer I'm in. I'm just making a selection. I'm going to click along wherever I want there to be a tree trunk. I'm gonna extend it here. Oops. I'm gonna go up here. Okay. And then I'm also gonna grab it here and pretend that the root ended there. Go up and around. Ooh, this is time consuming, but it's probably the best way to do it if you don't have an accurate line to follow. So if I do this, now I have a selection, and I want it to pay attention to the colors. So I go back to my color layer, ornaments. I right click, layer viewer cut. Then when I turn it off, it grabbed the whole tree trunk. See? Yeah. So that's another way to do it. That's like a more physical way to tell it. That way, now that I have this tree trunk layer, I'll name it tree trunk. And even though I manually selected it, if I hit the paint bucket tool again and I make sure it preserves the transparency there, I can just fill it in now and it'll stay together because that was the selection that I made. And then it just stays there. That's how it should have been. I didn't draw it very well. Cool. This is totally enough information to keep you busy for a week or a month or a year. Kept me busy for like 10 years. That's all I did. I will let you go cook some dinner. I should probably pay attention to my child. The other child is visiting a friend, so. Hopefully that's enough. I will wrap everything up for you. Since you're not on Patreon, but you did pay for the class, I will just like zip it all together for you for whatever. I'll make some simple notes and send those to you too. Okay. And thus concludes our day. Excellent. I'm so glad. I'm so glad that it was useful because it's stuff that I know that I've known for a very long time. Sweet! Thanks for the follow! Shaziza? My alerts work. Isn't that great? Yeah, thank you! Anyway, I'll try to do another one soon and enjoy the rest of your day, you guys. Bye! I don't have a closing thing, so I'm just gonna stop streaming now. Bye! Take care.